Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick preview for the Sony Alpha A6000. This is the successor to the widely popular NEX6, and as a result, the A6000 has some pretty large shoes to fill. With that said, in terms of pricing and availability, the kit package you're looking at here, which does come with the exact same kit power zoom lens originally bundled with the NEX6, will run $799.99 and ship in mid-April. You can also pick up the body alone in mid-April for $649.99. Now, in terms of enhancements, there are quite a few, and I'll be going through that through the course of this video. There are also some things that I think some NEX users, specifically NEX6 or 7 owners, will be disappointed with, because this is a camera I think many of you have been waiting for, but nonetheless, a great value, at least as far as it appears right now, at that $800 price point. Because keep in mind, the NEX6 was $999 when it launched a year ago. So first and foremost, we've moved up from a 16 megapixel sensor to a 24.3 megapixel sensor. It is not the same one from the NEX7. This is a new sensor, at least from what I understand. We also have a far improved hybrid autofocus system. So the phase contrast hybrid system that was in previous NEX models basically has been blown away by what has been put forward here in the A6000. Part of that is now we are able to achieve 11 frames per second, but it's really more about the autofocus tracking that has been improved, and I'll get to that a little bit later. We now have NFC, something that we did not have beyond Wi-Fi on the NEX6. The ISO range has stayed the same. Video quality has also stayed the same. Avchd Codec is where you're going to get your best performance, 1080p, 60p, 24p, and then of course you can use MP4 at 30p for more sharing-friendly file sizes. OLED Viewfinder, which sadly actually has been reduced in terms of the number of dots displayed. I'll get to that a little bit later. Tilt LCD, pop-up flash, and multi-interface shoe, just like the ones found on the NEX6. And as I mentioned before, the exact same 16 to 50 millimeter E-mount, of course native E-mount, power zoom kit lens. You do also get a W series battery, like all NEX and now Alpha mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras based around aps-c sensors, and that W series battery is in other Sony cameras as well. Included AC adapter for charging, shoulder strap, body cap, eyepiece cup, and micro USB cable. So that rounds out what's in the box. In terms of images, I've shown you the front, and you may have noticed that it appears like there's a bit of tri-nav mojo going on here from the NEX7, but I can assure you it is not. This is literally just the buttons from the NEX6, and I'll show you right now what I mean. The NEX6 mode dial used to be stacked on a customizable ring here. These have just been put side by side. So no tri-nav capability. That's another reason I don't feel that this is an NEX7 successor in any form or fashion. The grip also slightly modified. It definitely shares more of a resemblance to the A7 and A7R. But still very similar to the NEX6, no doubt. They've also been wise enough, they being Sony, to color match all of the parts of the camera. So now the shutter release is black. The multi-interface shoe also is black. That's something that on the NEX6, at least in terms of aesthetics, they did not get right. Or at least in their eyes, they did not get right. How much individual users care about that is another story altogether. The front end of the camera definitely looks a lot more like the NEX7, but that's just because the actual lines of the camera have changed slightly. Side view, basically very similar to the NEX6 again, and that's the camera it's replacing. And then finally, the back of the camera, which again also looks almost identical to what we have here in the NEX6 in terms of the movie record button placement, everything, the layout of every button, and even the articulating screen. As I mentioned before, that has not changed either. Same range of motion, same actual resolution. So pretty much identical layout. And as you can see, as I mentioned before, no tri-nav. That is a mode dial. That's a programmable dial, so or ring, I should say, thumb dial. So that is what to expect in terms of the difference in body. When it comes to the left-mounted OLED viewfinder, they have lowered the dot count to 1.4 from well over 2 million dots in the NEX6, but Sony has argued that that's really offset by the, I believe, the processor or just overall technology they're employing is what they're saying. You will not see a degradation in performance. In fact, they're saying it should be at least as good, if not better. But I've already taken you through most of the specification improvements. I'll just show you very quickly some standards for those of you that want really finite details about this camera. Let's start at the top, and you will see the specifications in terms of OS requirements. It is an E-mount camera, of course, in terms of the lens mount. In terms of the drive system, 11 frames per second in high mode, 6 in mid, 2.5 in low. The flash sync speed, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of this, but it is all there online in the event that you do want to see every specific detail. The ISO range I already mentioned remain the same. There are some new elements of software here. We're no longer looking at the NEX menus of days past. We have non-point and shoot style menus, more pro style menus like the ones you will find in the A7 as well as the RX10, RX100. This is something Sony realized consumers preferred, menus that were simple to navigate and really just more effective, and not a pony show, frankly, like we had on previous NEX cameras. In terms of other specifications that I may have missed, that's what I'm really looking for. I've already mentioned the importance of that Bions X processor, which is being used in all of Sony's new cameras, and that's part of how it's able to achieve this 11 frames per second autofocus speed. But more importantly is really the sensor itself, which is what I'm going to jump down to right now, because that's where things have changed. Actually, it's not here in the specifications, but it's a matter of the hybrid autofocus system being far more effective than NEXs in the past. The 5R, the 5T, and the NEX6, of course. The NEX7 didn't benefit from that because it predated those models. But now we've got 179 points of phase detection on the sensor itself, the actual pixels. And that means that when you have a moving subject, focus tracking is going to be better than probably any, definitely than any NEX camera in the past. And Sony's bragging that this is the fastest autofocus system available in the entire business right now, which I wouldn't hesitate to believe. But in terms of focus control, you can see right there that 179 point phase detection that I just mentioned, and 25 points of contrast. So that's really the key enhancement, in my opinion, more so than even the extra frame per second or the bump up in megapixels. But for those of you that are NEX7 owners, Sony is well aware that the NEX7 didn't have perfect performance with all of the lenses it tried to deal with, and that's why they directly point out in marketing that we're going to be getting 20% better low light or higher sensitivity than the NEX7, because part of the trade-off with the NEX7 was you got more megapixels at the expense of not as formidable low light performance as the NEX6. So here, even though we've bumped up and crammed more megapixels into the same size aps-c sensor, Sony assuring you that the Bions X processor, as well as the new sensor altogether that we're dealing with, is going to still deliver great low light performance despite more megapixels being crammed into that surface area, which generally would yield more noise. Above and beyond that, video modes really the same as what we had in the NEX6. I do expect cleaner output. You do also have clean HDMI out. No weather sealing with this camera. I wish there was. The Play Memory App Store is still there, like most NEX cameras that have Wi-Fi capability, and now A7 and A7R cameras, the Alpha cameras, is what they really are at this point. and that'll give you access to free apps to control your camera, as well as paid apps to do things like full-fledged time-lapse with very little effort on your behalf other than setting up the camera and basically letting it do its own thing. In terms of the LCD screen, it stayed the same. The actual no downgrade there, but as I mentioned, the real downgrade is in that electronic viewfinder. And as you can see right here, it is still OLED, but it's downgraded to 1.4 million dots. And I think that's the same rating on the RX10. Maybe this is a matter of cost cutting in order to get that price down to $799. If that is the sort of compromise or corner that Sony had to cut, I think most consumers will not care. Of course, those that own the NEX 6 or 7 now will care because they will feel as if they're being shortchanged. But the reality is, I think Sony realized with the NEX 6 that part of the success wasn't just the balance of everything they put into it, but it was also the price point coming in under the NEX 7. And the entire build of this camera, the specifications, and the price point speak to, again, trying to emulate that same formula of success. No audio in or out like you have with the NEX 7. Another reason I don't feel this is a true successor, obviously, to the NEX 7, but the 6, that is an accurate representation of what at least was present. Again, going around the NEX 6 body, you can see the HDMI and micro USB port for charging and file transfer in the same location as found on the brand new A6000. Wi-Fi was there, the higher resolution OLED viewfinder with the proximity sensor to detect whether you're using the screen or not. I've shown you all the buttons are pretty much the same. The multi-interface shoe was already there. The built-in flash. I mean, everything is pretty much the same except the stacking of these control dials, and really, again, that autofocus system, as well as the speed of the autofocus system and the benefit of that Bionz X processor. So it'll be a tough decision for a lot of you whether or not it's a worthwhile upgrade from the NEX 6, I think. I think also a lot of users are going to be shopping the NEX 6 as it drops in price because it's still a fantastic camera. But there's no question, I think Sony shows in their pricing as well as specifications a very clear understanding of what they had to put together and market in order to make the A6000 a success. And the features laid out here, pretty much everything that I've gone over, that is what really does surmise what makes this camera so great. That 4K raw output, by the way, is another great thing. For those of you that didn't know that, if I didn't mention it, we do have a clean HDMI out. That's another thing Sony's been doing with all their cameras. But they're clearly letting you know that if you desire more features, if you desire more quality, you have to step up to another camera. Which camera that is exactly, I'm not sure, because based on what we see here, I still believe an A7000 is in the works. I think Sony is, playing a little bit of a wait-and-see game here, and we will have to do the same as a result. But overall, I like everything that I see with the A6000. We've got a mature line of E-mount glass to pair with it, Zeiss premium optics to, Sony's kit-style glass. The A6000 just appears to hit the sweet spot in the exact same way, if not arguably better, than the NEX 6. So a lot to like here. Looking forward to getting this camera in my hands, really testing out that high-speed autofocus system and that incredible 179-point phase on-sensor pixel technology, because that's the difference between keeping your subject in focus when it's moving and not, folks. And that's something that's been missing from NEX and pretty much all Sony mirrorless offerings to date. So a lot to like about this camera. Good price point, good feature set. Now it's just got to actually perform once I get it in my hands. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.